Welcome to another weekly Forex forecast, the first forecast going into 2025. We do know we have a very limited trading week next week. However, we want to keep up the routines. We want to stay in the momentum, especially going into the new year. And therefore, it makes sense to just keep on doing the routines and do another weekly Forex forecast, even though we know that the market volume or market movement might be limited, could be irrational because of the lower volume. However, we were expecting that already over Christmas time, and of course we had lower volume. However, we did get a few quite decent trading opportunities. In fact, I even took a trade on December 23 on Australian dollar Canadian. I mismanaged it, but it was a fair winner. So if you are interested in it in more detail, you can have a look on the trading journal, which is publicly accessible. So yeah, let's start with DXY on the weekly time frame. We see we are still here on top, actually on this range, and we were identifying this area here for quite some time already and said this is the last line in the sand and it should give us some input for the next bigger move. And we were expecting, if price can accumulate enough volume in this area, that we could see actually potentially price reaching back up into these areas here, the previous highs. However, we also know that it is still very well possible that we get a turnaround for a bigger move to the downside into the first quarter 25. So at the moment, still everything is possible, but my tendency is more leaning to US dollar long into the next year. Going down to the 4-hour time frame, we see we are building some kind of structure here, actually on top of this previous area of interest coming from the left side here. We do see, actually, we can just keep it simple and we will react based on the next market movements. So in general, as long as we stay within this overall range, we are still leaning more to US dollar long. If we get a clean continuation structure here in this area, that might be enough to start the next bigger move to the upside. However, if we get a more impulsive break to the downside early next week and then a deliberate bear flag consolidation just below the low, we could actually trade a short-term short in the US dollar into this space and then decide what happens here. It's still very, very well possible for price to create and accumulate more volume here. So I would not be shocked if we just trickle around here and come back one more time, testing this space here before we then get a continuation to the upside. That would still make sense in the overall bigger picture. Technically, that would be enough volume accumulated to move price to these previous highs. So, and we can also see that in the other dollar related pairs, that at the moment we are in this undecided phase and both directions would make sense in terms of a technical point of view. Moving on to Euro US dollar, it would not be my main priority for next week, but we will still have a look into it because we are touching on Euro US dollar every week. We see we are now kind of in no man's land. We are above this previous low here. We had some quite decent entries here in this area over the last weeks, which followed through and created, actually almost touched this previous low here to the left, but left a small gap. So, and in the bigger picture, if we say that the DXY needs to accumulate more volume for the next bigger move up, then we could actually, it would make sense actually for price to tickle up into this area, create a bigger, more complex structure before we then see the bigger move to the downside. And that would also make sense. Keep in mind, we are here on the 4-hour time frame. This would make sense to accumulate more volume in this area now before we then get the bigger move. I'm going back here to the daily time frame in the first quarter to at least retest the area here at around 102 or even further below. So pound US dollar is very, very similar. Of course, we do have slightly more interesting areas of interest. We are in general still looking for a continuation short. We had as well this structure very similar here to euro US dollar, and it still would make sense for price to go down into this previous higher time frame value area before we then potentially see a turnaround or a dollar creating a new high or going back to the highs, and then therefore pound US dollar would drop even further. Going down to the 1 hour time frame, we do see that in pound we have a very significant liquidity area here, this point of interest, and if we get a deliberate 1, 2, 3 structure into this area, I'm happy to take a short trade from these levels. However, as long as price is between somewhere in here, I'm not interested to take any trade at all. The other extreme would be if we get a more impulsive sell-off below this low and then a deliberate structure below. I would consider a short from here into the value area. US dollar Canadian, on the weekly time frame, we see we are still in a momentum run to the upside. It does not really look, even though during this lower volume time over Christmas, we ended in a bullish week. It's not with the new high. We are still slightly within the range of the previous week, but nevertheless we ended on a bullish week, and we still have a bit room to go to these previous highs here at 146, and therefore I'm looking for a long continuation. Going down to the 4 hour time frame, actually we have quite clear areas where we then can react based on price movement. So and my overall bias to the upside, if price is coming back into this area, into this liquidity area here, and giving me a nice higher time frame, at least a 4 hour entry reversal stick pattern, candlestick pattern, then I would consider entering along in this area. However, if I see that price is gaining some bearish momentum, breaking below here and then showing me some deliberate bearish price action in this area, I would then change my bias into a short. But in between here, not interested in a trade. So US dollar yen, starting on the weekly as well, we also see here we are still in a momentum run to the upside. It would still make sense to test the 161 again, may potentially make a new high, and therefore also from the positioning right now, I'm more leaning to a continuation long, and we are trading through this previous high here to the left, and if I get some deliberate price action retesting this low one more time, I would enter along in this area here. However, if price gains bearish momentum and we get some unexpected news or a sudden more sustainable strengthening in the yen, I would then change my bias if price starts to form a deliberate bear flag continuation pattern below this low here, which then would also easily be trading below this previous high here, and then have enough room to manage it at least to these lows here. So then that would really be then the time to switch my bias. But as long as we are in this range here above this level, my tendency is clearly to a continuation long. Australian dollar Canadian, starting here shortly on the daily time frame. No, actually on the weekly, we were expecting for price to potentially stall a bit, because just based on previous price action, we had this impulsive runs, then we always had some stalling in between. We were trading below this area of interest here to the left, and we said we had enough range here, but we are still looking for price to finish the move into this area here, into this more significant area of interest here, and filling actually this wick. Going down to the 4 hour time frame, we do see we had quite deliberate, very nice price action here, very clearly visible on the 1 hour. I took here this 1 hour entry trade. We had this area of interest here to the left, and then we had a small liquidity point here and the deliberate 1, 2, 3 structure into this liquidity area, a nice candlestick reversal pattern which actually allowed to enter a short, and that was on December 23 during low volume time, and then I got out for 1.5% on this trade. I mismanaged it a bit here, but price actually reached almost a 4, actually almost a 4-to-1 before it retraced, and I did not want to leave all my profit on the table, because at this time here, when price showed this bullish reversal, I was considering that price might come up one more time for a slightly bigger structure before then selling off from here, and therefore locked in 1.5%. Then now from a pattern separation point of view, we got this small area here which then got retested in form of this V shape and is now forming another bullish continuation. So we have, it's very similar to the previous situation here. We have this small wick here which did not get filled again here. Instead, price started to form a potential first base. So if I get a deliberate bearish continuation here, something like a 1, 2, 3 like we had here into this area, then I'm happy to consider a continuation short here and enter in this area. Yeah, so we will just wait how price reacts. Australian dollar Canadian on the weekly time frame, we see from a positioning point of view and from a higher time frame point of view, we still have this higher time frame value area here, this wick to fill, which we try to fill here in August, but we left a small gap, so it still would make sense for price to fill this gap before we then sustainably turn around. And at the moment it looks still more like a bearish continuation. Going to the daily time frame, we see that price is stalling in this area, just like started to barely make new lows here, all right? But it's not, it had the chance to turn around here, it didn't. We had here almost a continuation and a potential bullish reversal, then we had a strong sell-off again, and we are now in kind of undecided no man's land, and therefore I'm still waiting for price to show me some deliberate price action. And we do have a liquidity area here to the left, a very clear liquidity area which we barely touched. We now have two bases here and a potential 1, 2, 3 bear flag continuation, and if price is showing me on again a more higher weighted time frame on the 4-hour time frame, a reversal pattern in this area, I would consider a short in this area. The same goes for New Zealand dollar Swiss francs. Just shortly touching on the higher time frame, we are in a very similar situation. We have here this wick which would make sense to fill, which is the higher time frame value area. We are still in a bearish run. Going to the 4-hour time frame, it would make sense. We have actually here a second base. It would make sense for price to retest this low. We already filled this liquidity area here, but yet still, if we get this deliberate structure on a more weighted the 4-hour time frame with the 1, 2, 3, I would consider entering a short in this area just to finish the last leg, to finish the overall run into the higher time frame value area. New Zealand dollar Canadian is on the weekly time frame from a positioning point of view, as we discussed the previous 2 weeks already. It's still in my watch list to finish the next or the last leg actually into the high, potentially into this low here to the left, the higher time frame value area. We see we stalled last week's. It's kind of a potential volume accumulation to continue further to the downside. Going to the 4-hour time frame, we do see we have here a small liquidity point which did not get taken out. Initially it looked price might turn around here, would make sense because we have an area of interest to the left, and then instead it started to stall. But we do know we had previous week already lower volume, so it's potentially that price is just slowly creeping up into this area. But again, if I get on the 4-hour time frame at least weighted reversal candlestick pattern, I would consider a short in this area to finish the run into at least a slightly bigger area of interest before we see some bigger price reaction. Euro New Zealand dollar, again, kind of a tricky one, but an interesting one. We have some gaps here. We have a gap here on the weekly. We have a gap here to the high to fill this wick here. We had a nice structure here into this previous higher time frame wick. We see it clearer on the daily time frame. So we had almost everything. Let me shortly clean up here a bit. On the daily, we see here we had nice structure, right? So we had a structure into this area here that would have made sense for price to sell off in this area already. So we had a 1, 2, 3 in here. Initially it started to stall, price started to stall in this area, but then failed actually to connect. So it failed to sell off. Instead it started to creep up a bit more, and we are now still more in a bullish momentum run. And if I get here on the 1 hour time frame a more deliberate accumulation in this area for price to form a proper second structure high basically, and then a second structure base, at least I would consider an entry here with a proper candlestick reversal pattern. Then at the end here, Euro Yen on the weekly time frame. We also see here we still have this area of interest, this liquidity area here we discussed multiple times already over the previous weeks, and we have here still a very strong bullish momentum run to maybe close this gap here into this liquidity area. So I'm looking for longs at the moment. Going down to the 4 hour time frame, we have some highs. So actually this one is stronger than this in terms of a liquidity area, because here we had a more aggressive impulsive run then to the downside. Was basically the last liquidity area before we get the bigger run here to the downside, which we are now back up. So when price started to turn around here but could not connect, instead it's still sitting on this high and is accumulating more volume. So seeing here on the 1 hour time frame, we do have here a potential base. We did not close the gap here. So if price is coming back one more time and giving me here in this area a nice candlestick reversal pattern, I would consider entering along to finish the last leg up. However, if we get an impulsive move to the downside and then a deliberate bear flag continuation below this low, then that's the time I would change my bias and enter short, because then we are well within the structure again and have more than enough room to manage a trade to the downside, and that could become quite a big trade, because overall yen seems a bit oversold. However, technically it looks like it's still a bit more room to sell off even further. But yeah, based on the overall sentiment of the market early into 2025, we will see both is possible, and from a technical standpoint we have here a clear level to consider. As long as we are trading above this level, we are looking for longs. As soon as we see some deliberate price action below this level and a bearish continuation, we would change our bias and enter a short. Yeah, this is the watch list for the first week into 2025. And yeah, thanks for watching and see you next week. Bye bye.